They appear without warning. Videos stitched from shadows, uploaded in waves like signals from a place you were never meant to see. A man's name, a leader's face, the illusion of breaking news, but the stories twist into parables, half true, half dream, as if someone were rewriting reality in real time. You scroll past one, then another, each more uncanny, each dressed in the language of headlines but pulsing with the rhythm of folklore. They are not claiming history, they are rehearsing it, teaching you how to believe a version of the world that never existed. And the longer you stare, the more you wonder if the stories are only stories, or if they are rehearsals for something waiting to cross over. Underneath the endless scroll, a pattern begins to take shape, not in what is said, but in what is repeated. The same faces, the same rescues, the same betrayals, played out again and again like ritual theater. A leader enters a prison without warning. 100 children vanish into a mine and emerge untouched. Police appear at night, arresting men whose names feel almost familiar, yet never quite real. Each story is a mirror of the last, like fingerprints pressed into soft wax. You are told it is entertainment, a harmless fable, but why does it carry the cadence of a broadcast? Why do the thumbnails resemble news bulletins, their fonts the same as headlines you half remember from another life? Somewhere between folklore and propaganda, the line dissolves, leaving only the unsettling sensation that you are watching rehearsals for a history that has not yet happened. Archive.org still holds the files, redacted lines bleeding through the page. Subproject 130 Ritual use of narrative stimuli. In the margins, a note is scrawled in faint pencil. Repetition creates reality. No one ever explains who wrote it. And so you scroll deeper, night after night, telling yourself you can stop whenever you want, until the voices inside these stories begin to sound less like fiction and more like memory, whispering of a world that was erased before you could see it. They appear in your feed with the precision of a metronome, not as scattered uploads but as a flood, a ritual, a rhythm. One moment you're scrolling through familiar noise, ads, music, comedy, and then the tone shifts. A thumbnail flashes red with urgency. A title warns of betrayal, of a regime collapsing, of children rescued from darkness. A voice begins to speak, calm yet charged, and for a moment you could swear you're listening to breaking news. But the cadence is too neat, the arc too polished, the story too perfectly contained. This is not journalism. This is not reporting. This is something older, stranger. This is a parable dressed as fact, a bedtime story disguised as a bulletin. The pattern reveals itself quickly, but your mind resists, because every single piece feels familiar. Corruption is exposed. The guilty are dragged into the light. A leader stands tall as savior, unbending in the face of evil. The innocent are freed, children, minors, workers, always a group helpless without intervention. The story ends not in chaos but in catharsis. Then the cycle begins again. Different names. Different faces. But the same rhythm. A sermon disguised as news, repeated with the persistence of a heartbeat. Novels TV and channels like it upload with a velocity that borders on the impossible. Dozens of episodes each week. New headlines every day. It mimics the cadence of serialized journalism, yet the machinery behind it is invisible. No newsroom. No reporters. No correspondents on the ground. Only stories delivered at industrial scale, timed perfectly to keep you watching. The thumbnails wear the visual language of urgency, bold fonts, grainy photos, the aesthetic of crisis. And woven into these tales are names you know. Names like Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, presented not as a politician but as the protagonist of a fable. A savior, a warrior, a redeemer. This is where the unease begins to creep in. Because you recognize these people. You've seen them in headlines, in real broadcasts, in articles you half remember. Yet here, they are actors in an endless morality play. History is rewritten before your eyes, not to inform, but to rehearse. The truth is not the goal. The ritual is the goal. The repetition is the goal. Over and over until belief feels inevitable. Until fiction and fact dissolve into a single stream of memory. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect, The more often you hear something, the more you accept it as real, regardless of evidence. These stories don't need to convince you all at once. They just need to whisper in your ear night after night, shaping the contours of what feels possible, what feels familiar, what feels true. Like a hymn sung too often to forget, like a dream that lingers long after waking. And then comes the darker thought, the one you try not to name. What if these uploads aren't random? What if they aren't simply the product of faceless content farms chasing clicks? What if they are signals, test patterns, experiments in shaping perception at scale? If governments once used propaganda reels, sermons, or leaflets dropped from planes, what stops someone from using algorithm-fed bedtime stories now? The structure is too clean. The volume too relentless. The repetition too effective to dismiss as accidental. You begin to see it differently. Not entertainment. Not news. But rehearsal. Rehearsal for a version of history that someone wants you to accept before it ever happens. Rehearsal for betrayals not yet exposed, trials not yet staged, rescues not yet attempted. You tell yourself you are in control, that you can separate fact from fiction. But when the same story appears again and again, justice, rescue, redemption, your mind begins to treat the pattern itself as truth. And that is the most dangerous part. Because by the time reality comes, you are already primed to believe its shape. Already waiting for the villain, the savior, the catharsis. Already trained to trust the ritual. The only question that remains is the one that hangs like smoke in the back of your thoughts. Who benefits from rehearsing reality this way? And when the rehearsal ends, what performance will begin? They say the internet creates its own ghosts, but the first chill does not come from YouTube, it comes from the archives. Buried in boxes of declassified paper, in transcripts smudged by time, in typewritten pages stamped. Secret lies the blueprint for everything we think of as accidental. Governments have confessed, in their own words, to bending the human mind with repetition, suggestion, and manufactured narrative. Cultura was not rumor, it was policy. Subprojects spoke of narrative stimuli, of controlled exposures designed to erode the barrier between thought and suggestion. The church committee hearings cracked open a door, only briefly, revealing glimpses of experiments where mind control was not science fiction but operational doctrine. Non-lethal weapons, they called them, a phrase that concealed more than it revealed, technologies and techniques designed not to kill a body, but to bend a mind, to make a story feel more real than memory itself. You can still find them, if you know the right phrases to search. FOIA documents half redacted but still legible, speaking of psychic driving. The phrase is clinical, but the method is not. It meant forcing subjects to hear the same words again and again until something inside them cracked. Not persuasion, not debate, just a loop, hammering thought into bone until reality itself gave way. The testimony is chilling not for what it reveals, but for what it hints at. Experiments supposedly abandoned, files supposedly destroyed, yet the same patterns emerge decades later, this time not in clinics or laboratories, but in your pocket, glowing back at you from a screen you cannot put down. A story told once can be dismissed. A story told 100 times becomes belief. A story told 1,000 times becomes memory, regardless of whether it ever happened. The same rhythm, the same structure, corruption exposed, justice restored, innocence saved. It feels safe, even righteous, until you realize the comfort itself is the trap. Repetition as design. Repetition as programming. And suddenly the flood of content begins to look less like entertainment and more like digital psychic driving, scaled across millions of screens. What if these wisdom story loops are not harmless? What if they are the next phase of experiments that never truly ended? The archives show us the prototype. The algorithm delivers the weapon. And somewhere in the silence between upload and upload, a truth waits to be acknowledged. This is not chaos. This is choreography. Not accident, but intention. Not noise, but design. And if the rehearsal continues long enough, will we even recognize when the performance begins? You believe you are choosing. You believe every scroll, every click, every late-night binge is yours alone. But behind the glass of your screen, the platform is already deciding for you. The ghost in the machine does not speak. It filters. It hides. It decides what rises to the surface and what sinks without a trace. YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, names you trust as neutral hosts, but each one maintains a shadow vocabulary. Shadow bans, visibility filtering, do not amplify. Words that sound bureaucratic, technical, but what they mean is simple. What you see is not what others see. Your reality is curated, your curiosity is shaped, your suspicions are nudged into corridors chosen for you. The Twitter files cracked the door open. Internal emails marked users with invisible tags, hidden from their own eyes. Do not amplify. Search blacklist. Visibility filtering. These weren't rumors, they were categories, quietly attached to real accounts, real conversations. Whole narratives throttled, not by debate, but by silence. And silence is harder to argue with, because you cannot see what was erased. You can only feel the absence, like a phantom limb. On YouTube, the hand moves differently. Not through erasure, but through promotion. The algorithm rewards only one currency: engagement. Accuracy, truth, evidence. These weigh nothing compared to outrage, fear, obsession. Fringe cycles rise because they make you stay. They make you click again. They build the very patterns that keep you awake at night, refreshing, searching for the next parable disguised as a headline. What once required broadcast towers and printing presses now requires only your willingness to stay logged in. And Reddit, where whispers of paranoia gather, provides its own evidence. Entire threads vanish overnight. Users speak of posts deleted, accounts suspended, evidence scrubbed without warning. One day a theory is debated, torn apart, dissected. The next day the conversation is gone, as if it never existed. To anyone outside, it looks like silence. To anyone inside, it feels like gaslight. The pressure point is psychological, not technical. It's the gnawing suspicion that you are not seeing the same world as the person beside you. That your feed is tailored, your fears selected, your doubts amplified or suppressed according to someone else's design. And if suppression is real, if silence can be engineered, then amplification is too. Which means the endless flood of wisdom stories, the parables that cycle corruption and redemption, the rehearsals for reality, they are not rising by chance. They are being fed to you, chosen for you, pushed to you. Not accident. Not noise. Intention. And once you suspect the platform is not neutral, the paranoia shifts, because you realize you are not choosing what to watch. You are being taught what to believe. The first time you watch, it feels harmless. The second time, familiar. By the 10th, it feels inevitable. Each story folds into the next with the precision of a chant. A leader confronts corruption, a crisis erupts, a revelation is unveiled, resolution restores order. Again and again and again. The pattern is so consistent it becomes invisible, like the hum of electricity in the walls. You stop questioning the structure and begin to crave the rhythm. The ritual does not ask for your belief. It engineers the sensation that belief has already been decided for you. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. Say something often enough, and the brain confuses familiarity with truth. Propaganda officers once relied on it in reels spliced for wartime theaters. Preachers relied on it in sermons whispered week after week. Addicts meet it in the hypnotic spin of a slot machine, every reel a repetition of the last, every near miss convincing them the next poll will deliver. And now, the parable machine wears the same mask, an endless series of wisdom stories, all different on the surface but identical in their bones. The emotional hook is primal. Each tale offers a rescue fantasy, a collapse, a betrayal, a looming disaster, and then, at the brink, salvation. Helplessness relieved by intervention. The brain is wired to crave that release, to seek the cycle that promises both the wound and the healing. Comment sections reveal how deep the loop goes. Viewers whisper that these stories feel too real, that perhaps they are half true, that perhaps the line between fiction and news has already dissolved. Entertainment becomes speculation. Speculation becomes belief. The repetition itself is the point. Not a single story, not a single character, but the rhythm that conditions you to accept whatever comes next. Each parable is a rehearsal for the next parable, each loop a test of how easily your resistance erodes. And when the mind learns to surrender, not once but repeatedly, the question shifts from whether the stories are true to whether truth even matters. The ritual works not because you believe, but because you stop asking if belief is even a choice. By the time recognition sets in, it's already too late. The stories you've consumed no longer sit in the neat drawer of fiction. They bleed into memory, indistinguishable from news you once scrolled past or headlines you half remembered. You recall a rescue that never happened. You picture a trial that was never held. You feel the echo of betrayals that exist only in thumbnails and captions. And yet the memory is solid, immovable. The brain does not care whether something was real, it only cares whether it was repeated. Neuroscience confirms the fragility of memory. Experiments show how false events can be implanted through nothing more than repetition, suggestion, and the reinforcement of familiar detail. And when an entire digital ecosystem churns out endless parables, looping the same structures day after day, the line between recall and imagination dissolves. Memory ceases to be a record. It becomes an infection. Evidence of this already lurks in the archives. YouTube playlists with vanished episodes, Reddit threads missing entire conversations, timelines broken by deleted uploads. To the casual viewer, nothing is wrong. To the obsessive, the absences form a pattern, a sense that alternate realities once existed and were quietly erased. Some users describe remembering entire stories that no longer exist on the platforms, as though they lived through events now denied by the record. The effect is corrosive, the future remembered. Audiences walking away from these wisdom story cycles convinced they've already seen tomorrow. Not prophecy, not prediction, but the quiet training of expectation. When the event arrives, it feels inevitable, familiar, already lived. And when it doesn't arrive, the unease is worse. The mind clings to the ghost of a memory that no longer belongs to reality. So the final speculation is the darkest. What if these channels are not simply telling stories, but rehearsing them? What if they are prototypes for futures not yet written, conditioning millions to accept one history and discard another? You are left with the most haunting sensation, that you are living through a conspiracy twice, once as a parable, and once as reality. And the paranoia curdles into obsession, the chilling awareness that you've already remembered a conspiracy that hasn't even happened yet.